Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Bhadram Karnebhi Shunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyema Akshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangaistuštuvagum Sastanubhi Vyashema Devahitan Yadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vriddhishravaha Swasti nः Pusha Vishwavedaha Swasti nastarksho Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspatirdadhatu Om Shanti 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's read the seventh mantra. Om Nantaf Pragyam Na Bahish Pragyam Na Ubhayataf Pragyam Na Pragyana Ghanam Na Pragyam Na Pragyam Adrishtam Avyavaharyam Agrahyam Alakshanam Achintyam Avyapadeshyam Ekatma Pratyayasaram Prapancha Upashamam Shantam Shivam Advaitam Chaturtham Manyante Sa Atma Savigyeya. Sa Atma Savigyeya. It's interesting, Sa Atma means this Atma. The word Atma is to be known. So this is an interesting, a very important, really more than interesting, a very important thing to understand. And I will illustrate it with the help of, this is an example which is given in the Shastra, very important example. You may have seen it, but you may not have seen it. So I thought I would bring it up at this juncture. But in terms of an actual situation in life, I can give you the example because the Shastra gives a kind of a generic example, but I can give it to you in my life, how this comes up. So we have a grandson who is about 1 year, I don't know, about 9 months old or so, and he's still he's beginning to say words, but not fluently. Not fluently. So he's still grasping. We have to teach him, this is the name of this word, this is this, so on. So my grandkids call me Papa. Okay, this is a French, nobody says Pitaji or something like that in India, as we used to say it. This is Papa. So Papa is easy to understand. Papa is easy to say. And my wife is jealous of me because he can understand Papa very easily. Her name is Dadima. So there has 2 syllables. 3 actually. Dadima. Dadima. So this fellow doesn't know how to say Dadi Ma. Okay, so here's the situation. Listen to this. So how we are teaching him is we're teaching him to say the word Dadi Ma. And there is methodology because he can say daddy. And so we say Dadi. And so there's a slight difference and he gets a little confused. Is it daddy or is it Dadi? Anyway, that's one part of it. Then he gets tripped up by the third syllable ma. Anyway, so we are teaching him Dadi Ma, say Dadi Ma. And he's going to get it, I think, in the next, within a month or so. He's going to really articulate it as well as he does a lot of other things, Dadi Ma. Okay, the next job is, okay, now one other thing. He knows his grandma, my wife, very well. He knows her very well because she cooks for him whenever they come. She takes care of him. She gives him smoothie. I really don't do very much other than just give them hugs, but she does a lot of work for him. So he knows her. Okay. So the next thing we need to do, which we're doing, is once he knows how to articulate the words Dadi Ma, we have to say, this is your Dadi Ma. And we are doing it. We just, in fact, just last weekend when they were here, we asked him, I said, where's Dadi Ma? And I was not sure that he did not point it out to her and say, this is Dadi Ma. He didn't do that yet, but he's going to do it. So here's the thing. He knows this lady as someone. He knows the word Dadi Ma. The two of them are not yet connected. And once he connects it, then his understanding would be very different. He would say, Dadi Ma, can I have some candy? So his requests, his desires, etc. would be directly fulfilled. He doesn't have to say, he doesn't even know say candy also. So the words have to be all there. So the connection between someone that he can see and a word that he doesn't know has to be made. This is the example. Why am I saying it? What's the relevance in Vedanta? Pay attention to this. This is very, very interesting. And it goes back to the definition of the seventh mantra, Sa Atma Sa Vijñeyaha. What does Vedanta do in our life? This is what I think we need to be totally clear. What does it do? How does it help me? Here's how it does. This is what it does, based on that example that I gave you earlier. There is a word called Atma. And the word Atma is now populated by the meanings that gives its amazing Divya quality, what is called Divya. Divya means you can call it sublime or just amazing. What kind of qualities? That it exists independent of time, independent of space, independent of any vastu. And it is the very embodiment of joy, etc., etc. I'm not even giving you the full scope of it. But we have heard the word Atma or Paramatma. That's even better if you are to use Paramatma, because the Atma seems like, that's just me. Paramatma means Ishvara, Paramatma. So we know the word Paramatma or Atma, same thing. Okay? All right, so we know the word. This is kind of like Dadima. We know that this person is here. It is what is called aparoksha vastu. What does aparoksha vastu mean? Aparoksha vastu means not paroksha, sada aparoksha, always there, present. How can you ever be absent? Isn't it asinine to think about the fact that you are absent? You are never absent. You are perennially present. You are the very swarupa of presence, isn't it? Can you deny that? So you are always aparoksha. You are there. So just like, for example, it's not that Arjun, our grandson, has not touched his grandma. In fact, she holds him as soon as he comes home. He knows the person. But he doesn't know the name Dadima is connected to her. Yet. He will. My wife is very jealous of me because of the simplicity of my name. So he would say Papa. As soon as he comes home, the first thing he does is to say Papa. And it doesn't because he knows he doesn't love me any more than my wife, but it's simpler. He knows the connection. By now that he knows, if you ask him, where is Papa? He'll say, there. That's it. He's not sure about Dadima yet. Similarly, we have a word called Atma. Okay, word. And the word has some enormous implications associated with it. So whenever you say Paramatma, you say Sarvagyaha, Sarvashaktiman. All those kinds of qualities about the word Atma or Paramatma, you know that already. You know the word very well. Number one. Number two, you are always there. As aparoksha. In the case of my grandson, his grandma is pratyaksha, is in front of her. Always, whenever he comes. But he hasn't made the connection between Dadima and this person. Similarly, you are always there. It's not as though you are absent. But you know what Vedanta does? This is the uniqueness of Advaita Vedanta. Uniqueness of it. Please see this very, very clearly. Advaita Vedanta is something unique. We don't find anything else like this. Nothing. This is how unique it is. You know what it does? It makes the connection between the word Atma and you. Just like in the case of this young boy, finally he gets it. Ah, that is Dadima. Now he can go to business. Can I have this? Can you hold me? Can you do this? Etc. You can now transact easily because you've made that connection. Similarly, what Vedanta does is to make a connection between Abhidhana and Abhideya. Abhidhana is Atma, the word Atma. And Abhideya means you. Because what happens is, right now we do not connect them. We think of the Atma, Paramatma. I think it'll be easier to relate to this concept that I'm putting forth. If you use the word Paramatma, Sarvagyaha, Sarvashaktiman, as someone other than you, you'll say, are you Sarvagyaha, Sarvashaktiman? So you say, no. What are you talking about? I'm just this small being. Oh, but this is Ishvara, Sarvagyaha, Sarvashaktiman, and so on. That is Paroksha. That is Paroksha. And you know how it does it? This is the uniqueness of Vedanta. It is done through the Mahavakya, Tat Tvamasi. So Tat means the Paramatma, Sarvashakti, Sarvagyaha is Tat. And it says, do you know that Paramatma? You know the word Paramatma? You say, yeah, I know the word Paramatma. Do you know the meaning of the word Paramatma? Yes, I know the meaning of Paramatma. Paramatma means Sarvagyaha, Sarvashaktiman, and Anadi, and independent of time and space, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. That is what Paramatma is. It's not like saying the word Dadima once he knows it. But to connect the word Dadima with this person is what Vedanta does, is to say Paramatma that you think is unique, is remote, is just you. So this Mahavakya, this equation of the Jivatma and Paramatma is the uniqueness of Vedanta. You don't find it anyplace else. This is what it does. And in doing so, as we will see in more detail, amazing things happen. So in a very short summary, when we have to really explore this so that we are completely convinced of it, but in a very short summary, what the Mahavakya does is that the enormity of Paramatma, which is remote, is made aparoksha. And the other part is the smallness of the jiva also goes. So two things occur. By the word aham brahmasmi, ayam atma brahma tattvamasi, all the Mahavakyas, two things happen. One is that the enormity of Paramatma is no longer a mystery. Because how long are you going to, what gain are you going to have? What gain are you going to have to understand Parameshwara, Paramatma, Sarvashaktiman, Sarvagyaha, the very creator of the whole thing? How does it benefit you? This is the question. You can say, you know what, I have, I develop a certain shraddha towards it. I believe in Ishvara. Okay, you believe in Ishvara, that makes you somewhat a little bit more peaceful than you were a minute ago. As soon as you go to a temple and you bow and you see Ganesha in front of you, or Rama, or any of the Vigrahas, you feel a little bit better. Okay? How long does it last? How much better do you get? This is all debatable. And it's also based on your efforts. Karta tantram. You think that, see, this is the thing, that as long as it is remote, that means I have to somehow get there. And so it depends on your own effort. How often do you go to the temple? I have my mother-in-law, she loves to go to the temple every Thursday. Wonderful, bless her soul, it's so nice. She feels very peaceful but she has to go there every Thursday. The rest of the time, you're on your own. So as long as we keep on keeping Paramatma as paroksha vastu, I really don't gain what I need to do. I need moksha. I need total freedom now. I need it, everybody needs it, but I need to figure out how. So this is the very meaning of the word, the first sutra of Brahma Sutra, athato brahma jigyasa. So in this jigyasa means jnatumichha. Jnatumichha means the desire to know. This is a very big discussion. I am just bringing that in just as a commentary since I said it, but I won't spend too much time on it. But just very, very interesting thing. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Brahma Jigyasa means desire to know Brahman or Paramatma. Brahman here is Paramatma. So it is said that one cannot command desire. The desire happens automatically, but you cannot say, I want to have a desire. You cannot command a desire. So what is the need? What is the reason for saying Brahma Jigyasa? There's a big discussion, huge and very well explained in the end, which says, yes, it's true that you cannot invoke a desire. But what you can do is this is the whole reason for athato, ataha, all this, perhaps we've already done it to a certain extent, but we can revisit it. What you do is you invoke the fact that you've tried everything else, but it doesn't work. Is there a way? So this is what is called, Swami Akhandananda goes through this in great detail. This is anusandhanam. Anusandhanam means to resolve, to discover, more than ichcha. It is not a desire per se. Later on it becomes a desire, but in the beginning, you resolve to pursue. Anyway, I didn't want to go into that sidetrack, but going back to the main thing is, what is the contribution, the unique contribution of Advaita Vedanta? Why is it so unique? It is so unique because of Mahavakyas. All the other enormously detailed Shastra, all the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Puranas, Brahma Sutra, the huge literature, is only there to equip you to understand Mahavakya. And this is why a personal guru is absolutely necessary. And that's why I think this teaching only has limitations, because you require somebody to. There's a lot of these are not easy for us to. We can hear the words and so on, but we're not convinced. How is it going to be convinced? Because someone who you highly respect can come and and that person stays close to you and say, my God, do you know what is happening? You know that Paramatma that you think is remote? Can I tell you it is nothing but you alone? And doesn't leave you at that point. Explains it and convinces you. This is how the teaching should be done. And if we don't have that situation, you can only visualize it. You cannot see it. So anyway, going back to it, the uniqueness of Vedanta is that the benefit of Paramatma is brought to you directly by connecting the word from the person. You are a person. And the word Paramatma at the moment does not apply to you. But what the Mahavakya does, just like we are doing it with Arjun, to say, Arjun, do you know? Can you say Dadima? Oh, he is struggling, but eventually he'll say, yeah, Dadima. You know who this is? This is Dadima. Then he understands. Like he says Papa now, but he doesn't know Dadima. So this is what Vedanta does. It says, do you know? You are there at the moment, But at the moment you dismiss it, oh me, who am I? I'm just a small person. And you know the word Paramatma. And what Vedanta does is to say, no, no, no. Do you know something? You see, so for example, I think I'll just stop here from that. I think that, so this is basically what it does. This is we should be very clear about it. So the seventh verse, Nanta Pragyam, etc. And so how does it do it? This is all going to be a kind of like a Mahavakya. And not only this verse, the entire teaching is nothing but a Mahavakya. I am Atma Brahma. We already did that in verse number 4 or something like that. So it teaches you. Please, don't you see? Don't you see the connection? And for a while, like in the case of, I sympathize with this kid, Arjun, because he's struggling with words and struggling with objects and struggling with relationships. He doesn't get it at this point. Similarly is our case. We don't get it. I look upon myself as just Alpa Gyan or Alpa Shaktiman, and subject to time, subject to all kind of limitation. This is what I consider. And I keep the word separate from me. Oh, that is Paramatma. So, with that preamble, let's look into some detail to see how this is possible. What methodology, what prakriya does Vedanta use to make this happen? Let's take a glimpse of it. This is what we are doing. But I think that the vision of what the contribution of Vedanta should be clear. And I hope that example about Abhidheya and Abhidhana, the connection of it, helps in that whole process. Okay. Now let's look into the mechanism, the process by which the identity of the Jiva and Paramatma is justified. Let's look at the process, okay? So for doing that, all the previous classes that we have given should be kept in mind. In fact, that's exactly what the seventh mantra is. The seventh mantra of the Mandukya Upanishad is to summarize what has gone before that, piece by piece, into a composite, so that it all starts to make sense. That's what the seventh mantra is. So doing that, what we have been doing is essentially focusing on the difference between Bheda and Abheda, right? Bheda means differences, and Abheda means essentially non-difference. We've been doing that, Bheda and Abheda. We've also seen that Bheda is actualized by thoughts. Excuse me. In other words, you cannot have Bheda without the use of thoughts. So the thought is the mechanism by which we can see differences. Bheda means differences. And differences of so many differences. Like, for example, physical difference. Physical difference means that you can tell one person from another by looking at their appearance, physical appearance. Similarly, colors. You can tell the difference between yellow and blue with the help of the eyes and mind and so on and so forth. Okay, so the differences can be physical. Same thing on differences can be sensory, like smells. So there is nothing very definite about it, but you can tell this is a good smell, this is a bad smell. Similarly, you can say this is a good taste, bad taste. Forms also, etc. Then we have differences that are mental, manasik. So manasik means differences between disappointment, relief, desires, fulfillment. This is good, this is bad. Differences. All this is done by thoughts. This is what you have, this is the mechanism of differences. And not only that, you also have knowledge, differences in knowledge, what is called Bauddhika. Bauddhika here means not the Buddhism, but pertaining to your buddhi. Buddhi means definiteness. What time is it? You can say it's 9:07. Buddhi, definiteness, yesterday, tomorrow, far, near, is all Bauddhika, differences. So now we say, put all of them under a single category called Bheda. Essentially characterized by Bheda, 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 Bheda. This is all different kinds of Bhedas. But there is a jati, there is a family called Bheda. Next question. What is needed to ascertain Bheda? How do you know the differences? Well, if you think about it, you need a validator. You need a validator. You need to validate it. Validate it means to essentially ascertain it and say, yeah, I can see this is blue. I can see it. How do you see it? Hey, I can see it's blue. I think this is yellow. I think this is far. This is near. I know. It's called validator. So all differences have to be validated. Okay, I understand that. Next question. Can the validator have Bheda? Think about that. Can the validator itself have Bheda? The answer is up to a certain point, yes. But only up to a certain point. And what do you mean by up to a certain point? So the Vedas have to be validated by a single validator. Single validator. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. We will see why it does not make any sense. But for a short time, the validator needs to hold together to be able to ascertain the Vedas, and then it can slowly change itself. This is articulated very well in the very important first verse of Drik Drishya Viveka. Drik Drishya Viveka is absolutely very important composition. You know what the first verse is. Rupam Drishyam Lochanam Drik. Tat Drishyam Driktu Manasam. And then it goes on to other things. So this exemplifies that the validator cannot have a Bheda but only up to a certain point. This is what is called transactional reality. Vyavaharika Sat. How? Rupam Drishyam Lochanam Drik. Forms are seen. Forms means Bheda. And the validator is the eye. Eye remaining the same. If my eye is also flickering and so on, then the rupam also gets muddied. But the clarity of my looking at things in the room, walls, pictures, furniture, etc., is only possible if the eye is steady. So the validator must be very steady, right? But the steadiness of the eye also can change slowly, as it does. So, Rupam Drishyam Lochanam Drik. Tad Drishyam Driktu Manasam. And then the second verse will say, Andya Mandya Patutveshu Netra Dharmeshu Chaikadha. And he says that the eye itself can change. Andya Mandya. Andha means blindness. Mandya means not being able to see very well. Patutva means seeing very clearly. These are the Bhedas of the validator, the eye. So yes, the validator can have a change, but only relative to the Bhedas that you see, right? So like that you have, then the verse continues that the mind also changes, but Drishyaha Dhriviktush Tadrishyam Driktu Manasam Drishyaha Dhivrittayaha Drigeva Natu Drishyate. In the final analysis, this is why we say up to a point, but in the final analysis, Drigeva Natu Drishyate. It is only the seer, never becomes the seen. And that validator cannot have Bheda. You see that? ultimately there needs to be a validator. It's called the ultimate validator. That ultimate validator cannot have bheda. Intermediate validators can have bheda, but also slowly. Because if your eyes are also continuously flickering, then you cannot see anything. But over time, you can say, you know what? Not able to see as well. I need glasses. Fine. But in the fastness of time, it remains a validator. But slowly the validator itself can change. But all of this phenomena is only possible if it is intermediate, which means that it must be drishya. Means that the eye also should be seen. But the ultimate validator, drigevatu natu drishyate, that one cannot have a bheda, cannot have any differences. Why not? Maybe it can have differences. All right. Let's entertain your doubt that perhaps the ultimate validator also can have bheda. All right? That's your question. Not your question, but somebody's question. Now we say, who validates the bheda of the validator? When you say that no, let the validator also have differences, bheda. All right? Let's assume. How are we going to validate that? Because you cannot have any differences without any validation. How are you going to validate that? Well, the difference in the ultimate validator can be seen by another validator. Well, first of all, if that's the case, you cannot call it the ultimate validator. But assuming, forget about that part of it, okay, so you need another validator to assume that there are changes in the validator, okay? That validator cannot have any bhedas. Why not? Let it also have bhedas. How do we validate that? We need to have a validator to see the differences in that validator, who in fact was seeing the differences in another validator. This is going to go on and on. You'll never close it. Nothing will get done. This is a very important teaching that Swami Dayanand had made it very clear in our PRC course. It says the whole creation is predicated on what's called the buck stops here. It cannot go on and on and on. This is what is called anavastha in Sanskrit. Avastha means a definite state. Definite state means what? There are some differences. I am the seer. This is the seen. Very definiteness. There is no anirvachaniyata of it. But if the whole creation was meant to be a clinched, that's the word I remember Swami Dayanand used to use. If it is not being clinched, it will go on and on. Nothing will get resolved. This is not how the creation is. Swami Dayanand was he was so interesting, but he'd say, Ishvara, he would postulate it. He says, Ishvara must have thought about it. Shall we do it this way? No. It cannot be done. Let's not do it that way. Hey, that thought process, he was just postulating. And Swami Dayananda used to say, you know, for a human face, it's very interesting. The placement of the various sense organs on the human face, this is not an accident. So for example, he would say, Ishvara must have thought, well, maybe I can put the nose on the very top. Let's try that. No, then, Ishvara said, no, that doesn't work, because supposing you want to taste something. So you first look at it, so your eyes are here. And now to taste it, you have to take it up. And now your eyes cannot see it. So you have to make a connection. What I'm tasting, is it the same that I saw? He said no. So he was just sort of playing with it, that Ishvara must have thought about all combinations and finally decided this is the one that makes sense. So similarly, what is called nishkarsha, a beautiful in Sanskrit word, nishkarsha. Nishkarsha means the essence. What is ascertained, what is now, what it comes down to is what the validator cannot have any differences. The ultimate, you need an ultimate validator that always remains the same. There is no bheda in the validator. In fact, you can now see that if this was not true, there will be no life as such. What do you mean by there is no life as such? Just consider. You and I were young at one time. And now we are not young. I'm actually probably a lot older than you, but you're also older than you used to be. So I can put us together. So now just see how it would be if the essence of the abheda as characterizing the validator and bheda characterizing the drishya, the various bhedas, were not there. You know what will happen? So being young is a bheda, means it is pertaining to the age of the body and presumed age of yourself based on the body. So that is something which is a bheda. Okay? Now you are much older. So you can say, when I was young. You can say that. We say that all the time. When I was young. Do you know you could not say that unless the validator remains the same between when you were young and when you were old? Supposing the validator is also different. Okay, so you ask somebody, hey, what town were you when you were young? What city did you live in when you were young? If the validator is not the same, you know what the answer would be? I don't understand your question. What do you mean? The questioner says, no, I just want to know when you were young. I don't get it. So what don't you not get? Your question doesn't make any sense. Because I am now what I am. That's not true. So just look at this. Essential to the whole life is a non-changing validator. Essential to the whole life. Forget about the young. You get up next morning and you're a different person altogether. Validator is different. And your wife says, good morning, or your husband. And you say, what? Who are you? And there'll be no life without the validator remaining the same. I keep, sometimes I use the word so that just I invoke some thoughts. We just say Atma, Sakshi, same one, oh, this we have heard before. But the word validator means somebody which is really functionally very correct. All Vedas have to be validated. Who does that? If that is the case, we've already proven that the ultimate validator has no changes. This is an implication which has this is a fact which has amazing implications. So we've seen that I remain the same as a person. All right, let's go to the next step. What about you? I'm a validator, doesn't make change, has no changes. And you must also have the same validator. Is your validator different from mine? All right. That's the question. Is if another person, the essential process is the same, right? What is the essential process? That for every happening in life, there has to be a validator that doesn't happen, does not change. There's no Bheda, right? This is the essential process. So that's true for me. Is it different for somebody else? No, it must be the same, because I can't think of another way to express life. So yeah, it must be the same. Okay, if that is the case, isn't another person's validator the same as yours, as you? So for this, we look at another fact. Can the validator ever be seen by someone? Does it ever become your object? That cannot be. That's what the first verse of Driktikya Viveka is. Drigeva natu drishyate. Because on these intermediate validators like the eyes and the mind, etc., they can become both drik as well as drishya. While they are validating what their function is, they are a drik. But themselves can change and becomes drishya. But the ultimate validator is drigeva, natu drishyate. It can never be seen. It is only ever a seer. If that's the case, And then you can argue, but why not? Why can't it also be seen? Then we have a host of other problems that enter into the picture. What are the problems? If it is a drishya, if it is seen, this is the most important one. If it is seen, it's a drishya. If it becomes an object, who sees it? It has to be validated. It falls under the category of bheda. It becomes dependent. In fact, it becomes jada. It becomes opaque, inert. Again, we should understand the differences between inertness and non-inertness. Inertness means something that cannot illumine either itself or others. Whereas jnanam knows itself and others. It's a very big difference. And drik is only the jnanam, and drishya can only be the jada. So if the ultimate validator of another person is to be seen, it gets imbued with all these problems. It has to be validated. It becomes dependent. It is jada. It changes. So therefore, we can conclude that the validator of another person and the validator of yourself is the same. There is only one Chit Swarupaha. Enormous implication. So when we look at another person and conclude the other person is different from me, it clearly means not the validator, but what they are validating. The bodies, the mind, the thoughts, the sense organs, the age, all those are the only ones that differentiate from me, from my validated. But the validator remains the same. Abheda Swarupaha, Pratyak Swarupaha, never seen. This is a very interesting thing. And our acharyas point this out. They say, this validator, this Atma, this Paramatma, is a very interesting and amazing vastu. An amazing divya vastu. They use the word divya for that. Divya means alaukikam, not seen in the lokas, not seen anywhere. Something unique. What is so unique about it? It can never be seen, and yet it sees everything. Just close your eyes and just meditate on just that fact. What a divya vastu it is. Can never be seen, and yet it sees in different ways, in sees as me as a jiva. It views you as a jiva. So now let's kind of summarize the dimensions that we have already visited. Let's summarize the dimensions. One is, as an individual, you are the ultimate validator. And you can see it from the analysis of your own life. You cannot be alive and functioning unless you have a single validation point. Forget about the words validation point. Unless you are a validator. Your entire life you are the same validator. And you have different validated points. Youth, old age, disease, health, relationships. All those are Vedas. But underlying all of that, you are the Abheda, which is non-changing. Right? So this is one dimension. What is that dimension? You as an individual in your life. You can draw kind of like a horizontal line if you want to do it. Then we go into another dimension, which is the relationship between one individual and another individual in this life. That's a different dimension. There also we find that the validator has to be the same. So this is an amazing thing, because that means that underlying the diversity in our life, not only within myself, but with everybody else, it is all a function of the same validator, only one validator. So this is why Vedanta says, you are like a jnana samudra. You're like an ocean of jnanam, ocean of the validator. Validator is satyam, jnanam, anantam. I am, I know, I'm happy. This is the fundament, this is the water of the ocean. And from there you have differences in shapes that kind of come out of it and they go back to it, as we will see in a later analysis. But the validator remains the same. So this is the second dimension. Right? First dimension is yourself in your own life. The second dimension is you in relationship to others that you so perceive. There is a third dimension, and that we will go through in the next class. And that is the dimension of you and Ishvara. What are the commonalities? What are the differences? Just like we went through this first dimension, what are the commonalities between you as a young person and an older person? What are the differences between you as a young person and an older person? This is one dimension. Second dimension is, what are the commonalities and differences between you as an individual and somebody else as an individual. And the third dimension, which is what we have to think about next, is the dimension of what are the commonalities and differences between you and the Paramatma. This is where the Mahavakya comes in. And we will briefly explore, not in as much detail as we will see later on, but we will get an introduction to the third dimension. I won't have time to go over this today because of lack of time, so I will defer that to a discussion in the next class. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Second dimension is so nice to see you all. Ganeshan, yes, of course. Sakshi is the, and I deliberately did not use the word because sometimes this is what happens. One hears these words that you are familiar with and you don't think about it. You just say, oh, I know about that word. But the introduction of a new word like a validator, and then functionally that is an important thing because, actually it's a very interesting thing. I didn't mean to point this out until you asked that question. And Swami Akhandananda also goes over this. He says, the word Sakshi can be misunderstood because it's all a matter of how we understand this. It can be misunderstood as just a passive. Things are going on and I'm just Sakshi, I have nothing to do with it, which is true, ultimately. But in terms of understanding, you don't see the role of the Sakshi. And the role of the Sakshi is to be a validator. So the word validator, I have to look at a Sanskrit word for that. I'll try to do that. That's an interesting point. That the role of the validator is very important because nothing will happen until you see it. You see the difference between the word sakshi, which is just passive, uninvolved, and the word validator, which means it's a very important thing. None of the things will happen unless you have the ability to say, yes, yes, this is true, this is true. So there is a certain proactiveness to it, which got introduced by the word validator. So yeah, glad you asked that question. But really speaking, it's the same. It's the same. All right. If there's no other question, then I will close the class and hopefully we'll see you next week.